I met somebody that introduced me to tapping, and as soon as we did one session together, I immediately recognized it as a really powerful tool. I was sitting in the rubble of my life when my body was in pain all the time. I was about to lose my job, and I was having panic attacks all the time, and I still wasn't really spiritual at that point. Transformed kind of the way that I was looking at the world. I was always looking through the world with this lens of there's something wrong with me, and that's why my dad left. And when I took that lens off, it was like suddenly I could see that the sky was blue, but instead of using needles on your acupressure points, we are using the percussion of tapping on those points to help release energy blockages and allow our energy to flow again. When our energy is flowing, that's when we are in a state of healing and health. Now, what's happening on a scientific level when we're doing that is when we have anxiety or depression or pain or a limiting belief of any kind, our amygdala, which is the fight or flight center in our brain, has been triggered, and our body is rushing itself with cortisol to help try and keep us safe. There have been over 300 studies done showing how effective and how efficient this is as a self-healing tool. Tapping can be used on absolutely everything, by the way, whether it's a pain or a fear or anything in between, with really great results. Dedication and determination is probably one of the best assets you can have if you're searching for healing, whether it's physical or emotional healing. You just need to stay determined and you will find it.
Welcome to Rosabel Unscripted, the podcast where authenticity meets real life stories. I'm your host, Rosabel Soulful, and in each episode, I dive into unscripted conversations about personal growth, life challenges, and the experiences that shaped us. From heart-to-heart chats with inspiring guests to raw moments of self-discovery, I am here to share stories that connect us all. Whether you're seeking motivation, healing, or simply a dose of real talk, you are in the right place. So get comfortable, tune in, and join me on this journey of transformation, empowerment, and meaningful conversations. This is Rosabel Unscripted. Hey friends, welcome back to Rosabel Unscripted podcast, where we dive into the raw, the unscripted stories that shapes us. I'm your host, Rosabel Soulful, nurse practitioner, mom, creator, and your partner in this journey towards healing and wholeness. Today's guest is someone whose mission really resonates with the message, with the heart of this podcast. Amy Vincze. She's a certified EFT tapping coach. Amy, you have nearly 2 decades of experience, right? You
also doing this for quite a while.
Very good. And you're the founder of Soar With Tapping app. Very interesting. Why don't I let you tell us the story? What brought you to this journey?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I think it's fair to say that I've always been a bit of a seeker, always trying to understand myself and human behavior, not only my own behavior, but the behavior of others, so I could try to understand what was happening. I would always kind of dissect things and be really curious about what my response is to a certain trigger compared to somebody else. And I would kind of look at it and go, I don't understand why they're so different. And why is that person able to really laugh this off? And I'm taking it very personally. But then I've always also wanted to contribute and help heal people. So I started off with massage therapy and nutritional therapy. But then I got diagnosed with cancer at the age of 31, breast cancer. And there was no history of breast cancer in my family. So again, I got really curious. Of course, after a while, hearing the C word is kind of a big deal. And there's a lot of fear that goes along with that. So I had to work through all of that too. But then I got on the other side of it and I got really curious. Like, why me? Why not that person over there? Because we both don't have history of breast cancer in our families. So what is it about me that created this in my body? And I'm somebody that has always assumed that my thoughts and my feelings also contribute to the health of my body. So I was looking at kind of my emotional state at the time and my physical state and my spiritual state. At that time, I wasn't doing anything spiritually. So I was kind of looking at all of those things. And one of the first things I did was I started going to Tony Robbins events, which, if you know Tony, like, he's a really heart-centered person. I absolutely adore him. He's amazing. I went through his whole program and I loved it. And that was kind of the kickoff for this second half of my discovery period in my life. I met somebody there that introduced me to tapping. And as soon as we did one session together, I immediately recognized it as a really powerful tool. So came home from that and got certified very soon thereafter. Over the next decade, I didn't do it full time. I did it with friends and family. I did it with myself. I worked with my own coach on and off during that time, but I had kind of limited success with it. Sometimes it would fall flat, and sometimes I would have a moment where I thought, oh, that feels way better. And I didn't understand what the difference was. But then around 7 years ago, I had a kind of another crisis moment in my life where just, one of those moments where everything around you was crumbling. I was sitting in the rubble of my life when my body was in pain all the time, and I was about to lose my job, and I was having panic attacks all the time, and I still wasn't really spiritual at that point. And I started using tapping, but I started using it in a different way. I was really going after the root cause of the problems. And so I was having all these symptoms in my life, symptoms where I was anxious and having panic attacks and pain and stuff like that. And then I would start tapping and I would go, well, what is it? What am I afraid of? What is making me anxious? And so I would go, well, I'm afraid of failure. And there's a part of me that's afraid of success and what that would mean. And there's a part of me that's afraid of not belonging. So I would start tapping on those things. And then I just made the connection between traumas that I had experienced as a kid, like with my dad being an alcoholic and then him leaving us when I was like 4 years old. I just finally made the connection that all of my behaviors could kind of be traced back to those really significant events. And I never looked at them as trauma before. I thought trauma meant, like a big event, like a massive car crash or
Or something
physical
noticeable,
abuse.
right?
Yeah,
That you can
physical
actually
abuse.
see.
Yeah. And I didn't have that. And I never assumed that I had any kind of trauma. I just thought what I had were character defects. So going backwards and finding kind of the root cause of my trauma and then tapping on that made all the difference in the world. Like I probably tapped Rosabel for like 2 weeks, maybe half an hour a day, like really not, going on. I wasn't tapping 24/7 or anything, but in that short period of time, I really transformed kind of the way that I was looking at the world. I was always looking through the world with this lens of there's something wrong with me. And that's why my dad left. And when I took that lens off, it was like suddenly I could see that the sky was blue, and I had never been able to do that before. And it was such a profound transformation for me that all of a sudden I was like, I know what I have to do. I have to quit my job. I have to go all in on tapping, and I have to make people aware this is possible
absolutely.
for them. That they don't even
Wow.
have to go see anybody about this.
Right.
They have this tool. This tool can be available to them at any time, any place, and they can use it as a Band-Aid to make a tough moment easier, or they can use it to address the root cause of the problem and then not have that problem ever again.
And I was just about to ask you, so for listeners who are brand new to this, like what is tapping and how is it different from something like deep breathing or meditation, for example?
Okay, so tapping involves 3 different modalities. The first of which is Chinese medicine, energy medicine that you would associate with acupuncture. But instead of using needles on your acupressure points, we are using the percussion of tapping on those points to help release energy blockages and allow our energy to flow again. When our energy is flowing, that's when we are in a state of healing and health. Then we also incorporate a cognitive therapy aspect where you are actively talking about what it is you want to release. And then the third aspect is somatic therapy, because the act of tapping on your body can't help but kind of bring your energy back from worrying about the past and bring your energy back from worrying about the future and really get you grounded in the present moment. And in this present moment, we are typically safe and calm, and it's really easy to neutralize whatever it is you're focusing on with your tapping. Now, what's happening on a scientific level when we're doing that is have anxiety, or when we have depression or pain or a limiting belief of any kind, that means that our amygdala, which is the fight or flight center in our brain, has been triggered, and our body is rushing itself with cortisol to help try and keep us safe. But a lot of the time, our body is reacting to like past trauma. And we're actually safe in this moment, but it's reacting to anything that looks like what happened long ago that caused us a lot of pain. It's constantly looking out on the horizon to see, okay, is there any danger ahead? And when it recognizes something that even has a little glimpse of danger to it, then it puts us into that fight or flight mode and all the cortisol and all the things. What that does is that it prevents our prefrontal cortex from making the logical sound decisions around any certain circumstance that we're in, because our signals get stuck in the amygdala, in that place where it feels like we're not safe. So when we're tapping, we're telling our amygdala, that stress center, to de-escalate. Everything is okay in this moment. We are safe and calm in this moment. There's nothing to get anxious about. And so it is removing cortisol from our system 43% faster than if you had done nothing else. It's also lowering our heart rate. It is lowering our blood pressure, and it is increasing our immune system response, as well as increasing our happiness levels. There have been over 300 studies done showing how effective and how efficient this is as a self-healing tool.
Very good.
Yeah.
And I do have a question, curiosity here. Does tapping has like a cumulative effect? The more you do it, or is it something that you have to
That's
continue
an
to
interesting
do?
question. Yeah. So I've been tapping for a long time, and what I will tell you is that over time, not only do I clear things a lot faster, it's much easier for me to access them, to talk about them. It's just like building an emotional muscle. Like the more I exercise it, the easier it gets. And so, yes, I don't know
would
about
think so, yeah.
but it definitely becomes way easier over
Right.
time. Yeah.
Well, the brain likes consistency. So the more you
Yes.
do something, then you get used to it. And that's how it all works the other way around. You know, when we get the trauma, it just likes to follow patterns, right?
Yeah.
And so if you have a new positive pattern, it takes me to think that.
Yeah.
And you also mentioned that the whole idea of the safe place, which I love that, you know, that's so important, especially in this day and age, on these days where stress is on the rise. I mean, there's so much that's going on that we need to. I mean, I talk a lot about trauma. This is one of the topics I like to explore a lot in this podcast. I don't know if you're familiar with that book, The Body Keeps the Score.
Oh, yeah.
By Dr. Bessel.
Yes, that's a great
And
book.
it's important. And one of the points, for example, that he makes in that book is like, yes, at one point we thought, like you said, is the cognitive, the behavior, perhaps cognitive therapy, right?
Yeah.
But what it takes me to think, it's an implementation of more than just one thing. It takes more than just one modality to get rid of all that trauma that's been stored in our bodies. And I believe ETF, it's part of those somatic modalities that helps us clear out the movement, so on.
Yeah. And I think Each of those therapies by themselves is helpful, but only to a certain degree. Cognitive therapy, it's important to be able to understand our behavior and be able to verbalize our behavior.
Right.
It's very slow to work. And you also have to actively engage with trying to do it differently. And if it doesn't feel safe to try and do it differently, like if you still feel that anxiety in your body, it's much harder to move forward in that way. And so it can take a really long time.
And you can perhaps be even re-traumatized, because if you're just relieving over and over and not doing anything to make it better,
Absolutely.
it's a little complicated. And on that point, I wanted to ask you, what are some common misconceptions that you think people has about tapping?
Well, like when I first started, I just thought it looked so silly. And it just seems so like, how is this thing where I'm tapping on my body and looking so funny going to do anything significant? And
Right.
so I think that there's just a reluctance more than anything to engage with it because it seems, like too good to be true almost. But there are a lot of people that make mistakes about how to use tapping and may not realize all of the benefits or be able to harness the full potential of its power if they're doing it a little bit wrong, not focusing their words well enough or something along those lines. Like there's mistakes that people make, and one of which is not tapping it in the right place. This is one of those things where it's really good to be a perfectionist, because if one of the tapping points is right at the beginning of your eyebrow, but if you're tapping somewhere in the middle of your forehead, just being a little sloppy with where you put your fingers, it's not going to be nearly as effective, achieve the results. So that's one really simple thing. Another thing is that people often are too broad with the things that they're trying to release. And tapping is really good at when you focus on one thing in particular. And say there's a trauma that you're working through. Let's say it's a physical assault of some kind. I guarantee that whoever went through that trauma, there's multiple points along the timeline of that event that there was a decision made whether to do something or not do something. And there's either guilt, shame, or regret involved with those decisions. And every single one of those milestones along that timeline of that event need to be addressed individually. So, and somebody might look at that and start tapping and say, this big thing happened and it made me feel really sad or really scared or really hurt or something along those lines. And they might try to bundle it all in one thing, and it's going to take a lot longer to neutralize it, approaching it from that perspective. And it's not going to get to the depth of the feelings that are involved with it. And so there always might be some residue from that event that's not cleared because there's all of those individual decisions and individual emotions that need to be honored and acknowledged and released from our body in order to truly neutralize it.
Yeah,
So
that is, yeah. What I wanted to say on that is I tend to make a lot of comparisons for what it's worth. In general, like anything in life, I see this in clinical practice as well. I always tell my patients, no matter what the treatment, no matter it is to what you're trying, there are options out there. Give it a chance. Give it. Don't,
yes,
when we do a thing like once and like, oh, it didn't, and just give it a chance. But again, that's why it's so important having someone like you, for example, who's been doing this for so long, to come up here and say, hey, these are the things to look for. And so
yeah,
I'm thankful for you taking the time to be here with us and explain us. I can only know that you probably have helped a lot of people over the years. But I want to tap into any specific stories or any client stories that you don't have to say names or anything like that, but something that comes to mind that you really want to kind of showcase and to show the power of this practice.
absolutely. I'll give you a couple of different examples. And one of myself. because tapping can be used on absolutely everything, by the way, whether it's a pain or a fear or anything in between, with really great results. The first one I want to talk about, this woman had a phobia of flying in an airplane. And she was like 2 weeks away from taking a flight to Vegas, which I don't know if you know from California, flying over the mountains, there can be a lot of turbulence. She had all that in her mind and she was really worked up and feeling fearful about that. Now, because she did not have a previous trauma in an airplane where there was, you hit like an air pocket and you go into a free fall or, any other event attached to it, we were able to clear that phobia of flying within one 90-minute session, like literally so fast. And I contacted her a couple of weeks later and she said she had a great flight. She was even laughing at some points along during the flight when we talked about, the beverage cart coming out like that. All of a sudden that meant that everything was going to be fine. And so when it did happen, she got a big smile on her face, that sort of thing. And I even saw her a few years later and she still said that she's flying without a problem. So that was amazing. I also had a client that came to me with joint pain, which is typically a much more complex thing. And it has a lot of aspects to it that need to be released in order to not experience the joint pain anymore. But I worked with this young woman. She's in her early 20s. And she had had some sexual assault in her past and issues with parenting and stuff like that. And we worked through that over the course of a year. She also had issues with long COVID and all of that disappeared. Like across the board, all of her medical issues disappeared over that period of time. And she was fine after 1 year, which was amazing. One of the things that I really struggled with over the years, I had lower back pain for years, 20 years. So bad that I would, throw my back out and I'd have to crawl on the floor to the bathroom because I couldn't walk. And once I figured out what the root cause of that was and what it was related to, and I focused my tapping on that, I think I tapped for like an hour and a half to 2 hours total. That was one of the things that was going on 7 years ago. And I haven't had a single back pain problem since then. Like it has literally disappeared from my life. So there are a lot of different things that this can work on. Some take longer than others. Some are more complicated than others. But like you said, if you have the dedication to continue to seek out results and answers for yourself, you will find it. Dedication and determination is probably one of the best assets you can have if you're searching for healing, whether it's physical or emotional healing. You just need to stay determined and you will find it. But I also really advocate for kind of a comprehensive approach. I think tapping is really wonderful for physical healing because there's always usually an emotional element to it, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't go to the doctor. That
Right.
Western medicine has its place and I would always seek out that as well. But then I would also dive into kind of spiritual wellness and whatever that means for you. And then also dive into whatever kind of wellness you can find, whatever modality speaks to you, do it all. That I like, if you approach healing as a full-time job in your off time from work or whatever you're doing, you're going to achieve really fast results if you look at it from a lot of different angles.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. And I went back to my yoga practice.
Oh, yes. Wonderful.
And I've been doing it religiously, at least for even with my super, super busy schedule. And I feel so happy. Like every day, I'm like, I feel stronger. And like I said, there's no one size fits all. And that also helps you release other things. And there's so much out there. I I recently was listening to something on social media. Say, oh, there's so much, so you don't know where to look. I was like, no, actually, we should be thankful that there's so many options, because what we gotta do is try and find what fits our circumstances. Are Because not again, not one size fits all. But once we find what works for us, and that's like that. The individual part of it, make it yours, whatever it means to you, whether it's practicing meditation, yoga, also perhaps including tapping into it, and anything that helps us be better, feel better. That's what I absolutely advocate for as well.
Yeah.
And I wanted you to tell us about your app. Tell us a little bit more about it, how it works, what can people expect. Tell us more.
I'd be happy to. So when I was just starting off with my business and I was working with individual clients, which I absolutely love, I also felt like this need to reach more people with it. And because it's such a easily accessible tool, I started looking at the options of creating an app. And when I was doing that, I didn't see a option available that went to the depth that I know that tapping can. What was out there at the time was really kind of a high level version of tapping, which is great for teaching new people how to tap, but it really didn't get to that root cause. It didn't go deep enough, in my opinion, to really offer people that lasting and significant healing that they're looking for. Not that it doesn't work, at that high level, but it was more like putting a Band-Aid as opposed to healing at the source. And so that's really was my motivation with creating this app, providing people with the tools to deal with really big things like, how do I use tapping to heal myself from depression? Or how do I use it to heal myself from anxiety or physical pain or procrastination or addiction or any one of those things? And so there are a lot of videos in there that explain what each of those things are and the best, not only the best approach, but the best order to do the tapping rounds in, where to start and, where to go from there, because there's multiple steps along the way and you will have better results if you do them in the right order. Because if you go in there and you say, oh, I'm feeling depressed, but I'm going to start with this one and kind of do like whatever I'm feeling in the moment, it's not going to be nearly as effective. So if you take that approach, the approach from starting in a specific spot and moving forward from there, you're going to have really great results if you do it that way. So that's kind of what I set out to do. I wanted to give people the understanding of how to take control of those types of things, especially if nobody wants to use medication as a long-term solution. They can, if they're taking medication, they can start down this road and get to a certain point where they all of a sudden start feeling comfortable with their emotions. And it's not so scary to feel sad anymore because they have this tool and they can use it when they feel sad and pull themselves away from that feeling. So, but I also incorporated a journaling aspect to it. So people, when you're tapping, a lot of times many thoughts will come up. And oftentimes you will have a lot of clarity around a single moment or an event. To me, it's helpful to kind of write those things down sometimes. So there's a journaling aspect. There's also a place for you to set goals for yourself. Like if, you're struggling with procrastination, then that's one of your goals. And then you can list the tapping scripts that you feel apply to you under that umbrella and just go down them one by one. And it'll make it easier to approach your healing when you have time. Like sometimes when I find that I have time to tap, I'm like, shoot, what do you tap on? I forget. But then if I had a list of my goals, I could go, oh, yes, this is what I want to work on. That
Absolutely.
sort of thing. Yeah. So that was my intention. And hopefully I've provided a pretty good base for that. We continue to add more tapping scripts. There's already 160 different tapping scripts on there. We're adding like a women's health and fertility section. We're starting the process of working on a whole category for sex and a whole category for racism, which are pretty big topics by themselves. So
Absolutely.
we're tackling all the hard stuff and help, adding as we can.
Very good. And for someone listening today who perhaps wants to try tapping for the very first time, where
Mhm.
should they begin?
Well, there's a section called Quick Boosts, and those are all like 10-minute tapping scripts that will give you a really quick feeling, elevated feeling, whatever it is you want to tap on, whether it's 10 minutes to spiritual connection or 10 minutes to pain relief or 10 minutes to sleep, then it can really get you there quickly. It's not going to do any really deep healing, but if you need help in a moment, that's a really great place to start. And it's a great introduction to what you can expect from tapping. And then you can go into some of the longer tapping scripts and some of the deeper work.
Absolutely. Amy, is there anything I've not asked you that perhaps you're like, I really need to share this with the audience?
The one thing I want to stress about, not only about tapping, but about emotions, is that this is really going to encourage you to lean into uncomfortable emotions. And some people don't expect that. They don't expect to go in there and focus on sadness or focus on anger and really just continually talk about it while you're tapping. And the reason we do that is because all of those unexpressed emotions are still living in our body, whether it's from trauma or some other source, they're still in our body if we haven't processed them and felt them and then release them. And so that's what tapping does, is it helps us to engage with our emotions. We are emotional beings, and we haven't really allowed that in our lives. We haven't been encouraged to do that in our lives. In fact, it's been something that we have avoided in large part, over hundreds of years. So we have a long history of committing women who had really strong emotions to a mental institution.
Or even men,
Oh,
because have said
yeah.
that they've got to be strong and they're the providers and they're not supposed to cry and all those things, right?
I mean, the only emotion that they're allowed is anger, and everything else is considered weakness.
Exactly.
Right. So we're not encouraged to engage with our emotions, but that's exactly the thing that is so powerful about tapping, is allowing ourselves to feel the unexpressed stuff. The tapping allows us to access it. And it's when we lean into those emotions and really allow ourselves to feel it, that's when we are able to release it. So it's counterintuitive to the idea that you're going to feel better on the other side of really engaging with all of these hard, uncomfortable emotions. But that's exactly what we need to do. So
Right.
we have to build that emotional muscle and our willingness to feel the uncomfortable stuff in order to see the light on the other side.
Because if anyone is looking for that logic, it makes sense because a lot of times we have to get a little bit worse before we get better. And it also takes
Work. It takes a willingness to get uncomfortable. And the healing also happens in layers. So if you have a really core issue, say you have this fear that you're unworthy or undeserving, that's a really big one. And that it can show up in your life in many different areas. When you start working with the tapping scripts on that, you're going to have an initial success that's going to allow you to expand into your life a little bit more. As you expand into the space that you have created because you've cleared some of that stuff out, you're going to start wanting more from your life. You're expanding as a person. You are adding elements to who you are. And then you're going to bump up against that same fear again. And so it's going to require more work. And you might go, God, I really thought tapping was going to release this from my life forever. And the truth is, it released that first layer forever. And the more you expand and the more you require of life, the more it requires you to release more and more so that you can become the bigger and bigger version of yourself. So it will happen in layers, and getting uncomfortable actually means that you're doing really significant work. I just want to tell people it's not all, when you get in there, I've even had some people call it toxic, and I assure you it's not. It's just harder than you might expect sometimes.
Dedication, perseverance,
and
it
faith
also talks
that it's going to work. Yeah.
Exactly. Faith that it will work. That's right. And then also having the belief that anything in life that is worthwhile requires us to be willing, right? When I try to give advice to people, we have to also know that are they ready to take it and so on, and people get to it. And it's a good thing also because it's something that you can do at your own pace, right?
Right.
Wow,
Yeah.
Amy, this has been such a beautiful, enlightening conversation. I do believe that tapping is one of those hidden gems. Yeah. That is why I opened this space to talk about those things that people are not so sure, because as we grow and as things get busier, those emotions get put aside and we're like, okay, I don't have time to deal with this. And we keep moving and it's just piling up. And we have to do that work.
It'll show up at some point, whether, it comes up as a physical response in our body or you just shut down emotionally for whatever reason. It doesn't go away. So it's our benefit to address or it gets to that.
It will come out one way or the other.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. Hopefully it doesn't catch you off guard.
So Amy, how can our listeners connect with you?
They can connect with me on my website, Soar With Tapping. They can find the app in the Apple or Google app stores. They can find me on all the social medias. Just search for Soar With Tapping, and that's where I'll be.
Soar With Tapping, that is the name of the app?
Yes. And for your iPhone users, they can go to my website special. There's a code there that they can input into the app and get 50% off their first annual subscription. Unfortunately, Android users, they don't have the capability of getting a discount. So unfortunately, it's only for iPhone users, but hopefully it'll still be valuable regardless.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I have no doubt that it's very, very valuable. I want to try it myself. I like to try everything.
Yeah, I hope you do.
Yes, and I'll let you know how it goes. But hey, to our listeners, if you are carrying emotional pain, anxiety, fear, or even just everyday overwhelm, because life is rough, I hope this episode gives you hope. That's one of the main things I'm here for, to give you guys hope, the power to feel better. Well, thank you so much, Amy. It's been a true pleasure. And for everybody out there, keep living life unscripted. Take care, everybody. If this episode spoke to you, if it sparked a thought, a feeling, or a shift, I invite you to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss an episode. Visit www.rosabelzofel.com. Here on Rosabel Unscripted, we dive deep into real stories, mindful moments, and conversations that matter. Every week, we explore themes like resilience, healing, transformation, and the courage to rewrite your own story. So if you're ready to grow, reflect, and walk this journey with an open heart, hit that subscribe button, give the video a like, and drop a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let's keep the conversation going. There are new episodes every week.